Hi fans of high quality entertainment, we're here to talk about the 80s and beyond. A couple of videos ago I did a video on asking my viewers what are some bands that you know are talented and really good but you just can't get into. And there were a lot of feedback from that, so thank you. I love feedback. I love comments and thumbs up. And but I had one comment from 1504 Sean, and I just needed once again to do a video to respond to it. For Larry seems every band after 1979. Never saw him talking about great classic rock bands of the 80s. Larry stopped listening to music in 1979. That's right, I did. Once it was 1980, it's like, forget it. I don't want to listen to any 80s music. But, you know, so that, you know, that's what somebody thinks, right? So I'm going to respond to it. Because I've had that before. And I'm sure some of you people that are around my age, you know, in the 50s, 60s, I'm 64, you'll have younger people saying, oh, you're not listening to anything current or whatever. And it's like, there's a reason for that. It's because all of the great, at least for me and others, some others, all of the greatest music for me personally is from the, you know, some from the 50s, but 60s and 70s, and yes, 80s. It was around the 90s I started to, you know, the newer bands in the 90s I wasn't as connected to. And the thing that really gets me about young people in general, not, you know, not everybody, but just in general, is the music that they love now, whatever they're listening to. When they're my age, they are still going to love that music the most, probably, from that era. And the newer stuff, when they're 50 or 60, they're not going to have an interest in it. Just like I don't have an interest in most current music, for the most part. So I decided to make a list, and I'm probably excluding quite a few bands and solo artists, but just to let this person know, I did leave a comment, but it was just a short comment with some of the 80s bands that I like. And so I've made a longer list, and I'll talk about some of them, and I'd love, you know, your thoughts on 80s music too, and what bands you like, and whatever. Speaking of the 80s, and they're still making music today that I love. So when the 80s came along and, you know, New Wave and all that, I liked some of it and I didn't like some of it. Some of the bands that I just, maybe it was more because of their image than the music, but bands like, you know, A Flock of Seagulls with that, the guy with the crazy hair, the Thompson Twins, Wang Chung, the Fix, the lead singer, and he would do these really weird hand motions. It just didn't do anything for me. But yeah, in the 80s, now this is mainly the 80s, but it's also the 90s and even today, I guess. But here are some of the artists that I love or loved in the 80s. Michael Jackson. Yes, I used to buy Michael Jackson albums. Bad, Thriller, Dangerous, Prince, Purple Rain, and the follow-up, I forget the name of it at the moment, with Raspberry Beret on it. I love that. Madonna. Yes, I bought a Madonna album back in the day, and I enjoyed it. The one with Like a Prayer on it. U2. I was a huge U2 fan back in the 80s and 90s. They were probably my favorite band back then. Devo. I was right into Devo. The Pretenders, their first two albums. I know some of these are the late 70s, but still they were around in the 80s. The Rolling Stones. I kept buying Rolling Stones albums for some reason, even though I didn't care for them as much as the 60s and 70s albums. Bruce Springsteen, Tunnel of Love. That was my favorite of his. Billy Joel. I used to buy Billy Joel albums in the 80s. I don't do that anymore. The Clash. I am a big fan of The Clash. The Police I like. Sparks, of course. I've always loved Sparks. Def Leppard. I had bought one of their albums. I'm not a big fan, but back in the day I did. Metallica. I bought the Black album, was it called, when it came out, and I kind of liked it, but at the time. But I'm not a big Metallica fan, but I do respect them. Dire Straits, AC/DC, XTC, Rush. I like some Rush albums, even though I'm not a huge fan of theirs, like I said in the recent video. I still like a lot of their music. Talking Heads, one of my all-time favorite bands. Genesis, even in the 80s I liked them. The Cure. John Mellencamp. I used to buy John Cougar Mellencamp albums. Quite a few of them. Probably 5 or 6 of them in the 80s and early 90s. Queen. Beastie Boys, I bought one of their albums. The Smiths, I love the Smiths. Billy Idol, Rebel Yell, I loved. Elvis Costello, I was still a big fan of Elvis during the 80s. I haven't bought any of his albums in years and years and years, but I still absolutely respect him and think he's awesome. Frank Zappa, albums in the 80s. Lou Reed, Peter Gabriel, In Excess, albums I used to buy. Yes, even Aerosmith, Permanent Vacation, I really loved. ZZ Top, David Bowie, although I'm just like Glenn Calloway from The Basement. I'm much more of a big fan of David Bowie now than I was in the 80s. I actually don't think I ever bought any of his albums in the 80s, but that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy his music. Rod Stewart. Yeah, even in the 80s I bought Rod Stewart albums. The one with Young Turks, is it called? I love that song and that album that it came from. Bob Seger, The Go-Go's. Paul McCartney, up to a point. I did give up on him after Pipes of Peace for many, many years though. Paul Simon, Graceland, and other albums. Yes. Tears for Fears, The Arcade Fire. Now this is past the 80s, but still. The Arcade Fire, The Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam, Green Day, Nirvana, Foo Fighters. I remember buying their first album, which I liked. REM, Faith No More, Hole, Radiohead, Motorhead, Bare Naked Ladies, The Northern Pikes, great Canadian band, and Our Lady Peace, another Canadian band that I bought a couple albums of in the 80s. So yeah, so don't tell me, what did he say here? Larry stopped listening to music in 1979. No, I'm still listening to music as of today. But, you know, when I was younger, this is for the young people out there, because I know some young people watch my videos. And in the past, somebody would say something that would kind of irk me, and I would just let it be, you know, even though I knew they were wrong. And now I stand up, you know, if somebody says something and I'm thinking, no, that's not right. No, that's wrong. I'll let them know, or I'll do a video. But, you know, it's just to get that back out there that I did listen to music in the 80s. I was much hipper than some of you think I am. I know this channel is, when it is based on music videos, it's mainly, you know, the Beatles, Paul McCartney, and really popular bands like that. But the reason I focus more on the Beatles and Paul McCartney is those are the ones that get a lot of views and a lot of feedback. I have done I was asking one time in my community about ranking the albums by the Cars. There was a vote. And a lot of people had no interest in it. You know, so there's no point in doing videos if you're not getting the feedback. And so that's why I kind of stick to more popular artists. But that doesn't mean to say that I don't love music from other eras besides the 60s and 70s, because I do. Thanks for watching. Yeah, and so let me know in the comment section below what bands from the 80s and later on that you got into, if any. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.